Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video from my channel, Interactive Education, also known as JD's Classes, running for education from a student to the student for a better experience. And today we're going to discuss a very important topic and just going to continue the unit we had started, that is cell cycle and cell division. And today we are going to discuss this particular topic, that is the cell cycle, a very fundamental topic in molecular and cellular biology. And let's see what all we are going to discuss in this chapter. In the last video on this unit, we discussed the concept of cell division. I discussed mitosis, meiosis, and what exactly cell division meant. And in this video, we're going to look at what is the cell cycle, which is very closely related to the cell division process. And if you have not seen that video yet, I'll post a link in the description below. Do have a look, and then let's go forth with this video. So let's see what we have today. In the last class, we discussed cell division. But just like for any process to be carried out, like for example in our daily lives, we have some different things to do. So for whatever we do, we need to do some preparations. We always have to do some preparations that we're going to prepare for something. So if we leave the country, we're going to go for a holiday, a vacation, we always have to do something, and the important part of that is the preparation. So just like for anything to do, even if we have a party, we need to prepare for the party, we need to prepare the list for the guests. Also, if there's a wedding or any special occasion, we need to do preparations. So for whatever we do, we need to do preparations and we need to prepare for it. So just like for any event or for anything we do, for anything we plan to do, we need to do some preparations. In a similar way, the cell division process, which we talked about earlier, also requires some preparation. So you need to prepare for the process. You can't just start off with it. There has to be some systematic thinking, preparation for the process to be carried out. And this is what all the cell cycle is consisting of. It is basically a series of steps which we follow to prepare for the process of cell division. So if we want to define the cell cycle, we would say that it is nothing but a series of events which take place in preparation for the cell division process. Very essential to understand. Cell cycle is those series of events which take place in preparation for the cell division process. So today we're going to look at the different phases, the different events, these events involved in the cell cycle. This is what we're going to focus on today. Basically, let's have now a detailed look at the cell cycle. So if we look at the cell cycle, it's nothing but a series of events which we just discussed. So now let's have a look at the cell cycle. Actually, the cell cycle is basically a series of events, and there are mainly two phases of the cycle. So there are two phases of the cycle. The first phase is the interphase. The first phase is the interphase. The second phase is the M-phase. So interphase and M-phase. Let's have a brief introduction of both of them. Interphase is basically the preparatory phase. So preparatory phase, it's the phase in which the preparations take place. The phase which is preparatory is the interphase, where the different preparations for cell division take place. And M phase is that phase in which the actual division process takes place. So it is the phase in which the actual division process takes place. And this M in this phase right here stands for mitotic. So M phase is called the mitotic phase. The phase in which the mitosis process takes place, which I've discussed in my cell division video. So there are two phases. There's the interphase and there is the M phase. Interphase is the preparatory phase and the M phase is the division phase of the cell cycle. So now we're going to look at each and every one of them in detail. So first of all, let us now understand here one thing, that the cell cycle is a cyclic series of events. So it's obvious that there has to be one starting point and one ending point, which is the same starting and the same ending point. So this cyclic series of events can be, said to be a part of a circular series. I'm extremely sorry. Let me just draw this again. So if we look at this phase, and if we look at the cell cycle, or it's better I do one thing. I'll just draw a circle here. Just a second. Okay. Now, I'll be drawing a circle here. There has to be a sharpened rectangle. Alright, it's okay. We'll just draw it. So basically there's one starting point and one ending point, which is the same point. Okay. So there's a cyclic series of events which can be said to be in a circular form, and this is the starting and the ending point both, right? So this is actually the cell cycle format. The cell enters the cycle. So the cell is entering the cycle. So cell, it enters this cycle. Now after the cell enters the cycle, it goes into a particular series of a phase. So it goes in a particular phase, right? This part of the cycle. It goes into this part of the cycle, the first part of the cycle, and this first part of the cycle after the entry of the cell which it goes through is called the G1 phase. Right? G1 phase. So it crosses this G1 phase. There are various events which take place in this G1 phase, which we will discuss in a few minutes. So once we are done with the G1 phase, from here, it goes into another phase. Right? It goes into another phase. And this phase is called the S phase. This phase is called the S phase. It goes through this phase of events, and this is called the S phase. After the S phase, there is another phase into which it goes and into which it lands. This phase is called, okay, it's something like this, and it goes through this particular phase. This phase is called the G2 phase. So it goes to the G1 phase at first, then it goes into the S phase, and it goes to the G2 phase. And then finally, this small little phase here is a short phase. This short phase is the M phase. So this is how we depict the cell cycle. And this is the representation of the cell cycle. Right? So here you can see we have the M phase, right, which we've discussed above, the mitotic phase. But where is the interphase? Let's answer that question now. G1 phase, S phase, and G2 phase. All of them are preparatory phases. All of them are preparatory phases, and together these phases come together, and together they are none other than the they are none other than the interphase. So together, the G1 phase, that is this G1 phase, the S phase, and the G2 phase together form the interphase, this part of the circle. But only the M phase is a separate phase where the division process takes place, which we've discussed above. So this phase is the interphase consisting of the G1 phase, the S phase, and the G2 phase, and then we have the M phase. So interphase basically has three sub-phases. We have the G1 phase, the S phase, and then we have the G2 phase. This is called the interphase, right? Now we will discuss each of them in detail, right? Let's look firstly at the G1 phase. I'll be drawing them in the same color so as to make you understand clearly. So G1 phase. G1 phase it stands for gap 1 phase. And it is a phase where the cell grows internally. There's internal growth of the cell. Actually, in the interphase as a whole, we have internal growth of the cell. But in G1 phase, we again have one part of the internal growth of the cell. And it is basically involved in three things. Firstly, in the G1 phase, we have RNA production. We have production of the RNA. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. It is one of the replicas of the DNA, somewhat like a replica of the DNA. It's formed of proteins. So the cell produces RNA, right? There's RNA production. Then we have accumulation of proteins. So there's protein accumulation and mainly histone proteins, that is the histones. I've discussed about histones in the previous video on cell division. They are the proteins in which the DNA is bound together into molecules. So that is called the histone proteins. So it basically helps in a kind of, DNA, a somewhat genetic material production. So histones and RNA production. And the third basic thing, obviously, because this is very, very essential for any biochemical process which is of an active form, that is ATP production. So we have ATP production for energy to carry out this the cell cycle. So we have RNA production in the G1 phase. That's the RNA has to be produced. The ribonucleic acid has to be produced, which contains some degree of genetic material as well as proteins. Then we come to accumulation of proteins, mainly the histones, so as to help in the growth of the DNA, so as to help in the extension and more production of genetic and material and DNA. And lastly, we have ATP production to help the cell, do its biochemical procedures during the cell cycle. So these are the three main things which take place in the G1 phase, right? And again, it is a form of a growth phase. Both the G1 phase and G2 phase are growth phases. But it is a big misconception that the G here stands for growth. It does not stand for growth. It is a phase in which there is a gap in which internal growth takes place. However, that G does not stand for growth. It is a gap, right? So that's the G1 phase. Note please that here the cell again has two N chromosomes. It has two N chromosomes, as I've discussed in the last video. Let's come to the next phase of the cell cycle, of the interphase, better to say, that is the G2 phase. Again, sorry, not the G2 phase. We have to look at the S phase first. So let's have a look at the S phase. S here stands for synthetic phase. So basically, it is a phase which is mainly composed of the synthesis, which mainly involves the synthesis of various things. Let's see what kind of synthesis we have. The first thing which is done here is the duplication of DNA. That is duplication of deoxyribonucleic acid, which is the genetic material of the cell, like duplication of DNA. And the second most important thing is the duplication of DNA and then replication of duplication of DNA and then duplication of chromosomes. No, there's no ATP production here. It's basically a chromosomes. It is basically a synthetic process where this duplication of the main genetic synthesis takes place. Now, here in this phase, we have the duplication of the DNA of the cell, right? Of the nucleus of the cell, and then the duplication of the chromosomes. Or better to say, not even duplication, we can say doubling of the chromosomes. So even better to say is that the chromosomes get doubled. The chromosomes get doubled in the cell. So here there's the duplication of the DNA and the chromosomes get doubled. So as I told you, there are two N chromosomes in the G1 phase. So in the S phase, due to the doubling of the chromosomes, you have 4 N chromosomes. Not 2N, there are 4N chromosomes. And why do we actually duplicate this DNA and the chromosomes? It's because in the M phase, we need to break the cell down. So from 4N, we need to, as I told you, in the mitosis cell division process, each daughter cell needs to have 2N chromosomes. So to make sure that there are 2N chromosomes for each daughter cell, the parent cell needs to have 4N chromosomes as well as a sufficient amount of the genetic material to supply to its offsprings. So you see, that is why we have this duplication of chromosomes as well as the duplication of the DNA. So that's the S phase. And finally, let's look at the last phase, which we will be discussing here. Last phase of the interphase, that is the G2 phase. Again, it stands for gap 2 phase. Very, very important yet again. Now, in the gap 2 phase or the G2 phase, there are again a few more things. And as I told you, this is again a growth phase. It is again a growth phase like the G1 phase. But again, it has a few slight differences. First thing, which is common with the G1 phase, which is ATP production. So ATP is produced, that is common with the G1 phase. As I told you, for the biochemical procedures and energy requirements, we produce the ATP. After the ATP production, there is again an accumulation of protein. The difference between the G phase, we have accumulation of many protein, and this is the chromosomes in the phases in material. This is things the accumulation are genetic or things which involve the genetic exchanges or genetic spindles are the things in plasma membrane. These proteins are synthesized to in plasma membrane for production of plasma membrane for the cell. This is basically to produce the them the plasma membrane. If the plasma membrane after this protein accumulation. And lastly, third thing we do yet again, if you look at G it's really the production of RNA right here. These are the main in the third step, but now. So the two is the main phase of the this is the separation phase try to grow the cells the cell bit, then here grows finally the so really much. Now finally after we move on the phase where there is final division process taking place. And after the cell finally becomes and divide into cells. This we once this here after here then after this we go right in the X all that which I there so M A. The phase is its top phase, right? And here this division through my right. There are two phases and two phases. Two steps involved in the phase. The first step is arrow is the division of the full cacao carry on this nucleus. So first we are dividing the nucleus. Carry division of we have so this division of the cell. Here we break of the nucleus plus to be divided. We look to in the so this, you know of cycle here after they divide to of at the cell out into the cycle the side of again into the again the cell and go into an not cells phase out of the cycle and phase now the G0 phase also called G0 phase. Now what is the phase? Phase the G phase. Let's have a complete phase where the cell when a cell or differentiated undergo fine structure is in case cells stop dividing, they may differentiate and take. So this is the basic cell cycle and the phases of the interphase, that is the preparatory phase. So with this, we conclude this video on the cell cycle, and we basically discussed the interphase and some portion of the M phase. In the next video, we're going to discuss in detail the portions of the M phase, and we will also be looking at some checkpoints in the cell cycle which check that each and every cell cycle phase is done properly, and thus the cell can move forth in the cycle to the next phase. Thank you very much for joining me today. Goodbye. Stay healthy, stay smart, stay studious, and do take very good care of yourself. Any comments and suggestions, any doubts are welcome in the comment section below. Please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much. Goodbye, and stay healthy, stay smart. Bye-bye.